it's the bleeding that just won't stop. The latest jobs numbers are out and they are worse than almost anyone expected, adding a new sense of urgency to the battle over President Obama's stimulus plan. 598,000 jobs were cut in January, the highest number in 34 years. 1.8 million jobs lost in the last 3 months alone, and the national unemployment rate now at 7.6%. That's the highest level in almost 17 years. Let's get to senior White House correspondent Ed Henry. Very grim numbers there, Ed.
That's right, Naamua. And the president pounced all over these awful numbers. First of all, rolling out this new Economic Recovery Advisory Board, as you mentioned. It's going to be headed by former Fed Chairman Paul Volcker. A lot of other heavyweights on this board as well, such as Jeff Immelt, the CEO of General Electric, various economic officials and CEOs who have helped guide the nation through previous crises, but also the president jumping on these job numbers in order to say, look, there should be no delay at all in passing his economic stimulus plan that is still sort of stuck in the Senate right now. The president, for the third straight day, using the word catastrophe to warn about what will happen if there's no action.
If we drag our feet and fail to act, this crisis could turn into a catastrophe. We'll continue to get devastating job reports like today's, month after month, year after year. It's very important to understand that although we had a terrible year with respect to jobs last year, the problem is accelerating, not decelerating. It's getting worse, not getting better.
And the problem for the president right now, though, is that he has Republicans like Bob Corker of Tennessee on the Senate floor today saying that he doesn't think the answer at a time when there's a $1.2 trillion budget deficit is to add another $800 or $900 billion in new spending. And they're also more problematic for the president. There are Democrats like Dianne Feinstein of California saying she's not sure if this package will really stimulate the economy. So when you have a hard time bringing over Republicans, even though the president has talked a lot about bipartisanship, and then you have a hard time keeping some of your own Democrats in line, that makes it that much harder to get it through the Senate, Naamua.
Now, what about this proposal, Ed, that is being put forward by some moderate Democrats and moderate Republicans, getting together with a plan that cuts some of the spending out? Is that seen as truly bipartisan and representative of Congress?
It's seen as relatively bipartisan on the Hill, and I can tell you here from the White House that White House officials have been sort of encouraging those talks because they realize that without some sort of a breakthrough from that moderate center of the Senate, the president's stimulus plan is not getting through the chamber right now. So without some sort of a development, that's really where it would come, the breakthrough. It would come from some of these moderates in both parties shaving off anywhere from $80 to $100 billion in spending that might make this package more palatable to centrists in both parties. And what the president is going to do in order to try to step up his sales pitch is hit the road on Monday and Tuesday of next week. On Monday, he's going to Elkhart, Indiana, a town, an area that's been devastated by unemployment, a spike from 5% to 15% just in the last year. And then on Tuesday, he's going to Fort Myers, Florida as well, another place that's been devastated by unemployment, Naamua.
All right, so that's the beginning of next week. But what about over this weekend? Is there not a key deadline this weekend in the Senate?
Well, it's got to get through this weekend, essentially, through the Senate, in order to meet the president's deadline of getting this signed into law by the following weekend, President's Day weekend. Because, as you know, once it gets through the Senate, then it has to go to a conference committee where you take the Senate bill, which is much different than the House bill that passed last week, and they got to sort of settle those differences. And if they're having this much trouble already, once they get the House and Senate folks into a room, those negotiators, trying to settle all these differences, all the tweaks and changes that have been made to legislation, that's going to take a while. So the sooner they can get that to the conference committee, the better for this president. And that's why they're all waiting here sort of on pins and needles to see whether it can get through the Senate. The other thing I should mention is that on Monday evening, the president is planning his first news conference. He's going to do it in prime time, 8 o'clock Eastern time here from the East Room of the White House. And as you can bet, that's going to be another chance for the president to reach millions of Americans and talk about his stimulus package and the need for it, Naamua.
All right, Ed, and we should let everybody know we do have special coverage on Monday night in the run-up to and following that news conference by President Obama. Just before we let you go, Ed, you're talking about what's going on amongst lawmakers. We know also that voters have been very engaged with this process of discussing the economic stimulus package. We're hearing about lawmakers' phones being jammed. We're looking at new polls suggesting that support is slipping a little bit. Is the president willing really willing to spend a lot of political capital to get this through?
Yeah, he's going to have to, because he's already spent so much political capital on this being his first sort of signature initiative, and he's planning yet another way to sort of use the megaphone, which is a speech to a joint session of Congress on February 24th. And the whole point of doing that was he was hoping that he'd have this stimulus plan signed into law by then, and then he can go to the Congress and by extension the American people and say, okay, here are the next 3 steps I want to take in all of this. He's got a separate financial stability plan he wants to do to deal with banks and deal with the foreclosure crisis, other steps down the road. But all of that's on hold essentially until he gets this first step done. So he's going to have to use a lot of political capital to make sure this gets done. Otherwise, he's going to get off to a pretty bad start.